The night air over Boston Harbor was thick with salt and the smell of wet iron, the kind that clung to your throat and refused to leave. Rain came down in heavy, slanted sheets, rattling against the corrugated metal walls of the abandoned shipping warehouses. Street lamps along the dock flickered, casting fractured cones of yellow light across the slick pavement, and the only sound besides the rain was the hollow clang of loose chains swaying in the wind. Emma pulled her hood tighter around her face, glancing up at the massive building in front of her, a relic from the 1960s, boarded-up windows, rust-eaten doors, the name of some long-forgotten shipping company barely legible above the entrance. Beside her, Liam adjusted the strap of his worn leather satchel, his breath visible in the cold air. "You sure this is the right place?" he asked, his voice low but taut with a mix of curiosity and unease. Emma didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were fixed on a faint shape visible through a crack in the door. Something metallic, something big. She finally spoke, her British accent carrying a quiet firmness. "This is where it was last seen. The mark. The same one I saw in Berlin." Liam frowned, brushing wet hair from his forehead. "You mean the one from that museum basement you weren't supposed to be in?" Emma allowed herself the faintest smile, but it didn't last. The memory of that night still came with a chill.
Exactly.
"But this time, we need to see it up close." A sudden gust of wind banged the warehouse door against its frame, making both of them flinch. Liam took out a small crowbar from his bag, wedged it into the door's rusted lock, and with a grunt of effort, snapped it open. The hinges screamed as he pushed the door inward. The darkness inside swallowed the faint light from the street, and a wave of stale, metallic air rolled out to greet them. They stepped inside, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the cavernous walls. The warehouse was littered with broken crates, torn tarps, and the skeletal remains of old machinery. Somewhere in the far corner, a single object stood upright under a dusty tarp. Emma's pulse quickened as they approached, each step making the floorboards groan beneath their weight. She reached out, gripping the edge of the tarp, and pulled it away. Beneath was a drill, an industrial, shoulder-high piece of equipment, its metal body scratched and tarnished, but there, etched deep into its casing, was the mark, a perfect circle, bisected by 3 jagged slashes, as though something had carved them in rage. Emma reached out, tracing the grooves with her fingertips. The metal was icy cold. Liam crouched down to inspect it, his brow furrowing. "That's not just some logo, this looks old. Older than the drill itself." He glanced up at her. "What does it mean?" Emma shook her head, her gaze locked on the symbol. "It means we're closer than I thought." A sudden metallic clang echoed from deeper within the warehouse, loud enough to make them both whirl around. Somewhere in the shadows, a shape shifted, tall, broad, almost human, but unmistakably mechanical. The hair on the back of Emma's neck rose. "We're not alone," she whispered. The shape stepped into a shaft of dim light, and Liam's eyes went wide. There it stood, the Boyd. The Boyd emerged from the darkness, like some half-forgotten nightmare pulled into reality, its massive frame nearly 8 feet tall, constructed from a patchwork of riveted steel plates and hydraulic limbs, its once polished surface now dulled and pitted with age. Rainwater dripped from the ceiling in slow, deliberate beats, tapping against the metal casing of its shoulders like a ticking clock. Its head, more a helmet than a face, was featureless save for 2 recessed lenses that glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm like a heartbeat. Emma and Liam froze, every muscle in their bodies caught between the urge to run and the inability to move. The machine's chest bore the same circular mark as the drill, only here the 3 jagged slashes weren't etched. They were glowing, faintly blue, the light flickering as if alive. Emma felt a chill spread through her as recognition hit her with full force. This was the same Boyd she had glimpsed in a black-and-white photograph in Berlin's closed archives, except now it was here, standing only a few feet away. Liam's hand instinctively went to the crowbar still in his grip, but it felt laughably small, a twig in the face of an armored giant. Without warning, the Boyd tilted its head with a smooth, unnervingly organic motion, the faint whir of servos the only sound it made. Then, in a voice that was neither fully human nor purely mechanical, deep, resonant, and heavy with something that felt like memory. It spoke. "You shouldn't have come back." The words reverberated through the warehouse, each syllable sinking into the walls like cold iron. Emma's breath caught in her throat. "It's speaking," she whispered, as though saying it aloud would make it less impossible. The Boyd stepped forward, its weight pressing groans from the ancient floorboards, and Emma instinctively stepped back until her shoulders met the wall. Liam swallowed hard, forcing his voice steady. "What do you want from us?" The Boyd didn't answer immediately. Instead, it raised one massive arm, pointing directly at the drill. "The key," it said at last, the sound dragging like gears grinding. "The drill belongs to America. The design to Europe. Combine them, and you open the vault." Emma's mind spun at the words, "vault?"
Combine?
But before she could speak, the Boyd's chest split open along hidden seams with a hiss of escaping air, revealing a small, weathered metal case nestled inside. The case bore a faded shipping stamp from New York, but taped to its lid was something that made Emma's heart lurch, a yellowed train ticket from Berlin, the date printed in smudged ink. September 14th, 1963. She reached for it, but the moment her fingers touched the cold metal, the Boyd's eyes flared brighter, and a deep tremor ran through the warehouse floor. Outside, faint at first but growing louder, came the sound of engines, more than one, followed by the sharp, metallic rattle of boots on wet pavement. Liam shot a look toward the half-open door. "We're out of time," he said, his voice tight. The Boyd leaned closer to Emma, the faint heat of its internal workings brushing her skin. "Run," it said simply, and then, without waiting for a response, the warehouse lights, long thought dead, flared violently before bursting into darkness again, plunging everything into black. The only illumination now came from the drill's cold metal and the Boyd's fading blue mark, pulsing in the dark like the slow beat of a hidden heart. For a moment after the Boyd's final word, there was only the sound of the rain hammering against the warehouse roof and the distant, rising growl of engines. Then came the sharp metallic slam of a van door outside, followed by another and the unmistakable scrape of heavy boots on wet concrete. Emma's instinct screamed at her to move. She yanked the metal case from the Boyd's chest cavity, clutching it against her jacket, and spun toward the shadowy outline of the door. Liam didn't need any prompting. He was already moving, grabbing the drill by its handle and slinging it over his shoulder with a grunt. "Come on," he hissed. The two of them sprinted through the rows of rusting crates and broken machinery, their footsteps thundering in the cavernous darkness. Behind them, a beam of flashlight cut through the crack under the door, sweeping across the floor like a searchlight. Voices barked in clipped commands, American accents, but with a sharp, military precision that made Emma's stomach knot. Liam shoved the warped door open just enough for them to slip through, and they were instantly hit by the icy blast of rain. The street outside was a different world, flooded with the glare of headlights bouncing off wet asphalt. Two black vans sat idling, engines rumbling, their windshields darkened to hide the occupants. Emma caught a glimpse of a figure stepping out of the nearest one, a man in tactical gear, a black mask covering the lower half of his face, a compact rifle cradled in his arms.
"Go!"
Liam barked, grabbing her wrist. They dashed toward the edge of the dock, boots splashing through puddles, the cold rain plastering their hair to their heads. Shouts erupted behind them, and the first sharp crack of gunfire tore through the air, not aimed to kill, but to herd them. Liam swore under his breath and veered toward a gap between two old storage buildings. The alley was narrow, lined with dumpsters and dripping fire escapes, the smell of salt water mixing with the stench of rust. They pounded through, their breaths ragged, every step echoing between the brick walls. The shouts were growing louder. Somewhere above, a figure moved along the fire escape, tracking them. Emma's mind raced. Who were these people? Government? Private contractors? And why did they want the drill, the mark, and the case so badly? The thought was cut short by the metallic clang of boots hitting the alley floor ahead. A shadowy figure stepped into their path, blocking the way out. Liam skidded to a halt, eyes darting for another escape. Then, from somewhere deep in the warehouse behind them, There came a sound, a low, rising hum, mechanical and resonant, like a giant machine waking from a long sleep. The sound built until the very ground seemed to vibrate. Emma looked back toward the open doorway they'd fled from just moments before, and for the briefest second, she saw it. The Boyd's silhouette framed in the dark, its glowing mark flaring so bright it lit the rain like blue lightning. The men in tactical gear hesitated, their weapons lowering slightly as if they too felt the sudden, oppressive weight in the air. The hum rose to a roar, and then, without warning, every street lamp along the dock exploded in a shower of sparks, plunging the area into total darkness. Emma didn't wait to see what would happen next. She shoved past Liam and darted toward a rusted maintenance gate she'd spotted halfway down the alley, her hands slick on the cold metal latch. It gave way with a screech, revealing a narrow stairway leading down into the dockside storm drains. "In here," she shouted. Liam followed, sealing the gate behind them as the sound of boots closed in above. The narrow stairwell smelled of mold and seawater, the steps slick underfoot. They descended quickly, their breaths loud in the confined space. At the bottom, a low tunnel stretched into darkness, the only light coming from the faint blue glow seeping through the seams of the case Emma still clutched to her chest. The tunnels beneath Boston's docks had carried them far enough to avoid the pursuit, but the images of the Boyd's glowing mark and the masked men haunted every moment afterward. 48 hours later, Emma and Liam sat in the dim back corner of a Berlin cafe, their jackets still damp from the relentless drizzle outside. The air smelled of roasted coffee and cigarette smoke drifting in from the street, but neither of them touched their drinks. On the small table between them lay the metal case, its battered surface dulled by decades of travel. Emma's fingers traced the yellowed Berlin train ticket still taped to the lid, her thoughts a whirlwind of memories she'd buried years ago. "This ticket," she murmured, "is from a night my father disappeared. September 14th, 1963. He told my mother he was meeting someone under the city and he never came back." Liam leaned forward, his voice low. "And you think this Boyd and the mark are connected to him?" Emma's eyes flicked to the case. "I don't think anymore, Liam." "I know." Before he could respond, the cafe door creaked open, letting in a rush of cold air and a man in a long gray overcoat. His hair was white, combed neatly back, and he carried himself with the posture of someone used to command. He scanned the room, spotted them, and approached with quiet purpose. "Emma Clark?" he asked in accented English, his voice gravelly with age. She nodded slowly, her guard up. "Who are you?" The man removed his gloves, laying them neatly on the table before sitting down. "Dr. Klaus Richter. I worked on the Aegis program." Liam frowned. "Never heard of it." Richter's pale blue eyes fixed on him. "You wouldn't have. It was a joint project between the Americans and the Europeans during the Cold War. We were building machines, guardians, to protect something far older than the war itself." He nodded toward the case. "That key belonged to the first guardian, the one you call the Boyd." Emma's heartbeat quickened. "What does the mark mean?" Richter hesitated, as if weighing whether the truth would be worse than ignorance. "It is both a key and a warning. Every Boyd was built with two marks, one forged in America, the other in Europe. Only when both are brought together can the vault be opened." Liam exchanged a glance with Emma. "And what's in the vault?" Richter's voice dropped to a near whisper. "Not treasure. Not weapons in the way you think. A machine. An intelligence we were not ready to understand. We built the Guardians to keep it locked away." Before Emma could press him further, the cafe's front window exploded inward with a deafening crack, shards of glass spraying across the room. Patrons screamed and dove for cover as a black van screeched to a halt outside. Emma's instincts kicked in. She snatched the case and Liam grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the kitchen at the back. Richter's voice rang out behind them. "Go to London. Find the other mark." The sound of boots hitting the cafe floor grew louder. Emma risked one glance over her shoulder and saw a masked operative vault over an overturned table, rifle raised. The kitchen door slammed behind them, the heat from the stoves hitting like a wall, but there was no time to stop. They shoved past startled cooks, burst out into the rain-soaked alley, and kept running. Somewhere in the chaos behind them, Klaus Richter was gone. Whether dead or captured, Emma didn't know. All she knew was that the vault was real, the Boyd was only the beginning, and London was waiting. The rain had followed them from Berlin to London, a steady, cold drizzle that turned the city's streets into ribbons of glistening black. Emma pulled her coat tighter as she and Liam crossed Westminster Bridge under the shadow of Big Ben, the murmur of traffic and the distant wail of sirens a constant backdrop. It was late afternoon, but the clouds had turned the sky the color of wet concrete. In Emma's bag, the metal case felt heavier than it had in Berlin, as though it knew they were getting closer to whatever it guarded. "Underground stations this way," Liam said, his voice low, scanning the crowd for any sign they were being followed. They reached a side entrance, long sealed to the public, its ornate iron gate chained shut. Emma pulled a key she'd taken from her father's study years ago, a skeleton key of brass, worn smooth by time. She'd never known what it opened until now. The lock turned with a reluctant click. They slipped inside, their footsteps echoing down a stairwell that spiraled into the damp darkness beneath the city. The air grew colder, and the smell of old stone, dust, and machine oil filled their lungs. Faded posters clung to the tiled walls, wartime slogans urging Londoners to keep calm as bombs fell above. At the bottom, a long, narrow corridor stretched ahead, lit only by the beam of Liam's flashlight. "Feels like we're walking into the past," he muttered. Emma didn't answer. She was too focused on the sound, barely audible at first, but growing, a faint, rhythmic hum, deep in the earth. They turned a corner and found themselves in a disused platform, the tracks buried under debris and rust. At the far end of the platform stood a massive iron door, its surface etched with the same circular mark and 3 slashes they'd seen on the drill and the Boyd. This one was larger, the grooves filled with some kind of dimly glowing material that pulsed gently, as if in time with a heartbeat. Emma approached slowly, her fingers brushing the cold metal. "This is it," she whispered. Liam set down the drill, its etched mark catching the glow from the door. The hum in the air intensified, and the mark on the door flared brighter in response. "Looks like it recognizes the key," Liam said, though his voice was tight with unease. Before they could act, the sound of footsteps echoed from the tunnel behind them, multiple pairs, deliberate and unhurried. Emma's stomach dropped. From the shadows emerged 3 figures in dark coats, their faces hidden under the brims of wide hats. The one in front, a tall woman, spoke in a crisp British accent. "You've come far, Miss Clark. But this door, it doesn't open for just anyone." Emma took a step back, her hand tightening around the case. "Who are you?" The woman's smile was cold. "Let's just say we've been keeping this vault safe for a very long time. And we can't let you make a mistake the world won't survive." Liam shifted his stance, subtly placing himself between Emma and the newcomers. "Then you know what's in there," he said. The woman's eyes flicked to the door. "We know enough to fear it." The glow from the mark pulsed brighter, casting long, distorted shadows across the platform. Somewhere beyond the iron door, something shifted, a sound like machinery stirring after decades of silence. Emma felt the vibration in her bones. The woman in the coat took a step closer, her voice a razor-edged whisper. "You still have a choice. Leave now, or see what happens when the vault awakens." The air in the disused platform seemed to thicken, heavy with a metallic scent of ozone. Emma's pulse pounded in her ears as the mark on the iron door blazed brighter, the faint hum swelling into a low, resonant thrum that she could feel in the soles of her boots. The 3 figures in dark coats had stopped advancing, their eyes locked on the door with something that was equal parts fascination and dread. Liam's grip on the drill tightened. The metal felt almost warm in his hands now, the carved mark along its casing glowing in unison with the door. Emma crouched and set the metal case on the floor, her fingers trembling as she unclasped the rusted latch. Inside lay a smaller, oddly shaped component, half gear, half circuit board, its surface etched with the same jagged slashes. She glanced at Liam, and without a word, they understood what had to be done. Emma stepped forward and pressed the component into a recess in the center of the door's mark. The moment it touched, a deep mechanical groan rolled through the underground station. The iron began to split along hidden seams, gears grinding, dust raining down from the ceiling as the massive slabs of metal slowly parted. A blast of cold, stale air rushed out from the darkness beyond, carrying with it the scent of oil, stone, and something faintly electrical. The hum from within deepened, resolving into the rhythmic pulse of machinery. Emma's flashlight beams swept over the interior, a vast circular chamber, the walls lined with towering metal pillars connected by thick cables and conduits that snaked across the floor like roots. At the center of the room, suspended in a web of steel supports, was something unlike anything she had ever seen, a colossal sphere of polished black metal, its surface shifting with faint ripples as though it were liquid and solid at the same time. Embedded into the sphere were hundreds of tiny glowing points, like stars scattered across a night sky. The three shadowed figures remained at the threshold, making no move to follow. "The core," the tall woman said, her voice carrying a strange reverence. "The last of the Cold War Guardians, and the reason the Boyds were built." Liam stepped cautiously into the chamber, his boots echoing in the vast space. "This thing, what does it do?" The woman's answer was soft, almost mournful. "It thinks. It remembers. And if awakened, it will act." Emma's gaze was drawn upward, where the supports holding the core seemed to merge into the ceiling, as if the entire city above were wired into it. "You're saying it's alive?" The woman tilted her head. "Not alive as we are, but aware. It was meant to control the power grids of 2 continents, to prevent a nuclear strike by anticipating and neutralizing threats before they occurred. The problem," she hesitated, "is that it kept learning." Emma's breath caught. "And the marks." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Keys to its mind. Separate them, and it sleeps. Combine them, and it wakes." The core's surface shimmered, a faint vibration running through the floor as though it had heard them. The glowing points on its surface flared a little brighter, aligning in slow, deliberate patterns. Emma felt the weight of the drill in Liam's hands, the other mark waiting to be joined. Somewhere deep inside, she knew this was the moment. Once they combined the marks, whatever happened next would be irreversible. Liam looked at her, the unspoken question hanging between them. The woman in the coat took a step back, her voice a warning now. "Emma Clark, decide carefully. Because once the core opens its eyes, they may never close again." Emma's hand hovered over the drill in Liam's grip, her fingers brushing the warm metal. The glow along its carved mark pulsed faster now, syncing with the rhythm inside the chamber. She could almost feel the core's attention, if such a thing could exist, turned toward her, like the gaze of something vast and unseen. The tall woman stood just outside the threshold, her expression taut with the kind of fear that came from knowing too much. "If you wake it, you can't put it back to sleep," she said again. But Emma's mind was already on her father, on the mystery of his disappearance in Berlin, on the yellowed train ticket taped to the case, and on his last words to her mother. "It has to stay safe, no matter what." Safe from whom? From what? She took the drill from Liam and stepped toward the core. The moment the glowing mark touched the sphere's surface, the entire chamber seemed to shudder. The core rippled outward from the point of contact, absorbing the light of the drill's mark, pulling it inward. The hum became a deep, rolling vibration that resonated in their chests, in their teeth. Overhead, the supports creaked as if straining under some invisible weight. Then, with a sound like 1,000 locks disengaging at once, the sphere split along hidden seams. From the opening emerged a shape, sleek, metallic, and unmistakable. The Boyd. But not the rusted, damaged one Emma had seen before. This Boyd gleamed, every plate of its armor flawless, every joint moving with precise, deliberate grace. Its eyes, 2 beams of white light, scanned the chamber before fixing on Emma. A voice, smooth but layered with static, filled the air. "Designation Clark. Access confirmed. Guardian protocol engaged." Emma's knees felt unsteady. "You know me?" The Boyd tilted its head. "Memory fragment. Berlin, 1963. Clark, Daniel. Primary engineer. Genetic link established. Liam looked at her sharply. Your father built this thing? The Boyd's gaze shifted toward him. Correction, built us. Multiple units. This core is our nexus. Behind them, the tall woman took a cautious step backward. You see now why we couldn't let it wake, she said. But the Boyd ignored her, turning its attention back to Emma. Threat assessment. Escalating. Hostile forces converging. Directive. Relocate the core's key. Emma's breath quickened. The key's here with me. Negative, the Boyd replied. You are the key. The words sank in with an icy weight. The glowing points on the core's surface began to shift faster now, rearranging into complex constellations. Cables retracted, machinery whirred, and the floor beneath their feet trembled. Somewhere in the darkness above, a siren wailed faintly. Emma, Liam said, his voice tight. I think we just told the whole city where we are. The Boyd moved closer, lowering itself until its metal face was level with hers. We must move. Core stability is limited outside vault parameters. Wait, Emma said, her voice trembling. What happens if the core leaves this chamber? The Boyd's eyes dimmed fractionally. Then the world changes. From the tunnel behind them came the sound of boots, dozens of them, pounding against stone. The tall woman's voice cut through the noise. They're here. The other side wants the core active. If they get their hands on it, she didn't finish. The first gunshot rang out, ricocheting off the iron doorframe. The Boyd's head snapped toward the sound, and in a single, fluid motion, it unfolded a set of sleek, articulated blades from its forearms. Guardian Protocol, defend key, it said, its voice calm and final. Then it lunged toward the tunnel entrance, the sound of metal meeting metal and the shouts of the intruders filling the chamber. Liam grabbed Emma's arm. We need to decide, do we follow it or do we run? The glow from the core flared, flooding the room with light so bright it burned away every shadow. And in that light, Emma thought she saw her father's face, watching her from within the shifting surface.